guys, Robert1 here coming to you with a new Yu-Gi-Oh video talking about Konami US's updated policy documents. Now, we haven't actually in the UK or the European regions had this update to the Yu-Gi-Oh policy document, so it might be quite different, but there has been a lot of changes on the new document, and I wanted to talk about the 4 most important changes on this policy document. Because there's a lot of things on this document that have changed, and when they're implemented into the European area of the Yu-Gi-Oh TCG, or if they are, or when they are, it will be nice to have these on lock just so you guys know what the actual policy document is. So, as you can see, Konami US has implemented new policies into the game representing YuGiOh Neuron, about note-taking, about loops in the game, and also about some other things that I wanted to talk about. So in today's video, we're going to be talking about these new policy updates. Hopefully you guys will enjoy, because this stuff is good to know, and if you are a Yu-Gi-Oh player, it's always good to know what the policies in the games are, what the policies are like, put changes to the game as they go along. And seeing as I am an actual judge, I need to read this stuff as well, just for when it is implemented into the TCG in Europe. So I am ready to actually showcase what this is and be able to implement it into a tournament when tournaments actually start up again. So guys, let's actually get into this, because there is a lot of stuff that I wanted to talk about. So let's actually start off. So we're going to be starting off with loops, because loops seem to be the first thing that we need to look at in this post, because it is one of the biggest things in the game. Now, in the new document, this is a new section in the Konami US policy document, and it is basically talking about controlled and infinite loops. Now, the difference between these two loops is pretty much, a controlled loop is a loop that you have control over. So you're the player who is performing the loop, performing the actions simultaneously, so you gotta keep going in a specific order to be able to do the loop. So they can keep going infinitely in that state, but it is not a loop, it is a controlled loop, because the loop is controllable. You can't just be like, oh, this loop can never stop, unlike an infinite loop. Now, what we need to know about these new loops is pretty much what a lot of judges were already doing for loops, such as this 6 samurai loop. So we're going to go ahead and read this, and we're going to show what this does. So, a controlled loop. Controlled loops are loops where the actions are voluntary and a duelist controls how many times the action will repeat. They are able to stop the loop at any time by simply performing a legal action that does not cause the next effect of the loop to activate. So pretty much, as I said, it's a loop that can be controlled. Now, if a loop like this is happening, these are the actions that you need to do. Perform the loop once to notify your opponent that you are able to do the loop. So pretty much just like in the samurai loop, you gotta go ahead and go red, blue, grave, summon them both back, and that's the full loop, and you can show your opponent that you can do that infinitely, because of gateway and stuff. Using a whole number, positive value, inform your opponent of how many times you intend to do the loop. So if you want to summon red and blue, or do the loop so many times, you got to tell your opponent. So if you want to do the loop, say 100 times or 1,000 times, you got to tell your opponent you want to do the loop that many times. If your opponent wishes to activate an effect, they may do so at any interval up to the whole number listed above, as long as they legally able to activate an effect. Now, what this means is, if your opponent has a hand trap or something that can be activated in between the first activation to the 100th activation, your opponent can activate that effect at that point. So that pretty much your opponent can, stop that thing from happening. So say you wanted to activate a max C on the 80th interval of the effect, you could activate the max C on the 80th interval, or on even the 90th interval, to draw some mana cards from your deck. Gameplay will proceed either the whole number listed above has been reached, a win condition has been met, life points reach 0, unable to draw from deck, required, so etc. Or until your opponent chooses to respond. Now, this pretty much means, as the last bit said, you can activate a hand trap if you want to respond at a certain interval of the loop, or if your opponent has activated max C and they go through the whole loop, and then your opponent is unable to draw a card from their deck. So you've gone ahead and activated max C, the samurai player has looped your entire deck, the intervals will stop there. So if they've gone like the 50th one, and now they've special summoned enough to make you deck out, there will be no more continuing from the 50th interval. The fifth one, duelists will not physically perform the action to keep the loop going, but simply resolve the effects accordingly. Now, what this basically means is if your opponent is performing the loop, they do not have to actually perform the whole loop. They do not have to perform the action continuously, and this is actually a really good thing because with the infinite loops, that is something that could really stall for time. And I know for a fact a lot of judges were actually playing that you do not have to actually perform the loop because the amount of time the loop will take. So if you're a samurai player going red, blue, gateway, game counters, red, blue, gateway, game counters, then you pretty much were able to put an infinite amount of counters onto the board. And you could continuously do that till time and then possibly do cowboy. Now, I know for a fact a lot of judges were actually saying, no, do the loop this amount of times, and that's how you will go. And that's the correct way to actually do this, in my opinion, because it says that you will not be taking a lot of time, and a less time will be doing, so more gameplay can happen, and you're not slow playing. So this is actually a really good thing that has been added into the document, and it was something I already knew a lot of judges were doing, plus myself as well. If any effects have been activated by the opponent to interrupt the loop will stop at that interval. So just like before, if your opponent activates an effect or something to stop the loop will stop and you can continue from there. If the duelist controlling the loop chooses to continue with the loop after the opponent interrupts the loop, they should perform the loop once more to ensure the loop can still be achieved and follow these steps again. Now, pretty much, if your opponent has done something and you can still perform the loop, well, then what this is basically saying, you start from step 1 and you go all the way through again. So pretty much, this is just telling you how to perform a loop if you are going to do it. So you have to tell your opponent how many times you can do it, you have to show your opponent that you have done it once and continuously do it, and pretty much from there on, you have to continue on until a game-winning condition has been met, or your opponent has interrupted you. There is also more about this information as well, guys, such as down here, where it says, after the stated number of iterations of the loop have been resolved without action from the opponent, the duelist may not initiate the loop again. That turn unless a tangible change to the game state has occurred, such as if the opponent has taken some action that has changed the number of cards on the field / in the hand. So pretty much what this basically means is, if you have changed the number of cards on board, such as link summoning, into a Saruja Skuldred using your monsters on board, and you can perform the loop again. You are allowed to perform the loop again, but only if you can declare the loop is going on again, and also perform the loop to perform other actions. So if you are going into the loop again after you have changed your stuff on board, or if your opponent has done something to change the stuff on board, so you can go ahead and do more stuff, you are allowed to legally do that again. This is what this part is basically saying, and there is also little explanations down here as well to things that can potentially happen. I won't go too much into those because they're just talking about Quillbolt Hedgehog, Cannon Soldier, and stuff like that, but it's pretty much explaining what I've just explained up here in a term using cards. Now we go on to infinite loops though. Infinite loops is a little different. Now, back in the day, infinite loops could not be played. You were not allowed to activate a card that created an infinite loop, and Konami have kind of changed the policy on this to make it so you can still technically activate cards that would create an infinite loop, but there is a way to stop it now to prevent the infinite loop from, causing problems in the duel. So, infinite loops are loops that occur involuntarily, usually from a series of mandatory trigger effects that meet the activation conditions for other upon resolutions, or due to the continuous effects that are stuck switching on and off endlessly due to the change in the game state. Such as like pole position, when you have a Purgatorio and equip spell and stuff like that. Since all the effects involving it in an infinite loop must occur, there is no clear point in the game where a player can stop the loop. So pretty much, if an infinite loop is occurring, it means neither player is able to stop it, and Konami have made a policy talking about how to prevent this from happening, and also how to stop it if it does occur. If an infinite loop occurs, follow these instructions. First, perform the action in one initiation of the loop's occurrence. So if a loop is happening, you would go and you have pole position, you would go pole position, Purgatorio, and the monster that would be increasing, and you would say, oh, this monster is going up and down, up and down, up and down continuously because of that is on board. 2. Determine if the loop will cause a victory condition, etc. An infinite loop which a duelist draws 2 cards, performs per initiation, will eventually end in the fulfilling a victory condition for one of the duelists. What this means is, if the infinite loop has a way to make one of the players lose, the infinite loop is fine and can continue. If so, proceed the initiation of the victory condition and determine the winner, just as I said. 4. If no victory condition will be achieved, the duelists should call a judge to determine the card that is the primary primary cause of the loop and send it to the graveyard. Play will resume from that point and no penalties are assessed. Any effects that could activate as a result of the card going to the graveyard can/will still activate. So pretty much what this is saying is if the infinite loop does not have a win condition, what you do is you just send the primary cause of the card, in this case pole position, to the graveyard to basically stop the infinite loop. This is something that in the game needed to be stopped, and now that Konami have actually put policy document on this, a policy in the game talking about where this should be stopped, this is actually very good because it means that it is now stoppable, and Konami have put a way to say this. So just like on YuGiOh Pro, where it just sends the pole position to the graveyard, this sends the pole position directly to the graveyard and stops it. There is also additional, if the judge determines that multiple cards primary cause the loop, the most recent activator should be sent to the graveyard. So if it's a lot of cards, different cards, you're going to send the last card activated in the chain to the graveyard. So as we go again, pole position would be the last card activated, so you would send pole position to the graveyard. And as we know, there are a lot of things here talking about pole position, because that was one of the things that I believe made Konami do this, other than just the 6 Samurai Infinite Loop combo. So those are the loop conditions in the game. These are the things that Konami added for loops. Loops in the game have always been an issue, and now that Konami have actually put a policy in place in the US policy document, it's good to know that Konami are actually aiming to change that in the game, so it's really, really good for us. Now, going on to some Neuron stuff, because Konami have actually made an app called YuGiOh Neuron, and they have actually put some stuff into the policy document stating that you can actually use YuGiOh Neuron in the game. So, let's actually read this. So, Neuron is a smartphone app issued containing a number of useful dual functions. Neuron has an offline mode, which includes but is not limited to life point application, coin flip, and dice roll applications, and a camera search feature and an online mode, which includes but is not limited to card database access, forbidden limited list access, and news and announcements. Now, just to let you guys know, smartphones in Yu-Gi-Oh were not allowed to be placed on the table during a match. You were not allowed to have your phone on the table during any match in a game of Yu-Gi-Oh because it could lead to cheating. Someone could message you, telling you what your opponent has in hand, stuff along those lines. So Konami did not allow that, but they're allowing it with YuGiOh Neuron now, as long as it is in an offline mode. During a match, duelists must turn off Neuron's sound effects and music. During a match in a sanctioned or official tournament, Neuron may be used in offline mode for the following functions only. Life point calculation, duelists must also keep a paper record of life points. So you're allowed to use the life point calculator, but you must also keep a paper record, so you still have to use paper records to make sure that all life points is kept correct and there is no issue with any life points down the line. So if you do want to use that, make sure you do still have a pad and pen, just so you can go ahead and write down life points from Neuron, because a Neuron doesn't keep a track of life points. You're allowed to use the dice/coin flip feature. So if you want to use dice on your YuGiOh Neuron, you're not allowed to do that, so you don't have to carry around a ton of dice. And if you want to use a coin flip for a coin flip effect, you're also allowed to use the coin flip. Camera search for card translations. So if you want to ever look for a specific card that you don't have a translation for now, Neuron allows you to actually use its camera search function to get a translation for you, which is actually really good because a lot of people in the game actually had to be carrying around other copies of cards, errata cards, stuff like this, just so you could go ahead and play your older copies or play different language copies. But Neuron kind of breaks that cycle, allowing you to play other stuff with the camera search function, so you don't have to always be like, oh, Judge, I need a translation for this. Neuron will allow you to do that. Online functions include news, card database, searching of associates / forbidden list may not be utilized during a match. So these are the ones that you are not allowed to use. You're not allowed to use the card database search, you're not allowed to use including news, and you're not allowed to use accessing the forbidden limited list. So pretty much those are the only functions that are online that you will not be allowed to use, and any other online functions. So whenever you're using Neuron, make sure your phone is on offline mode, and so you're not in any issue or have any troubles. So good to know that Konami are adding YuGiOh Neuron, seeing as they did make the app and it is actually quite useful for duels, so good on you Konami for doing that. I believe there was also a function that allowed Neuron to be used to submit deck lists as well. Neuron has been added as a way to register your deck as well. So you're able to use YuGiOh Neuron to actually register your deck list as well, that I see hasn't been added to the policy document, but it's actually good for a lot of people who don't need to, bring paper and pen, just have it on their phone and then give it to the presenter, and then they can use that as their deck list. So Good for that as well. But going on to the next policy that has changed, sleeves. You are now allowed to double sleeve in Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. So let's just read this policy real quick. You may choose to use plastic card sleeves to protect your cards during the course of a tournament. Sleeves are required at tier 2 and higher events. So pretty much, if you, same as normal, you would have to use sleeves for your cards, so there's nothing such as stacking and anything along those lines, which is obvious. All sleeves in the main deck must be identical to the same color, wear, and design. So main and side have to have the same sleeves. If you're using an extra deck card in the side deck, you must change over the sleeves. You may choose to put your extra deck sleeves in that are different from your main and side deck. All other sleeves rules still apply to the extra deck. So just as normal, you need to use the extra deck sleeves. You can change your extra deck sleeves, but you still can't use your side deck sleeves. You have to use the same sleeves on your side deck as you would for your extra deck cards in the side deck. All cards must be placed into the sleeves in the same direction and manner. So no cheating, stop stacking. You may have only one card in each sleeve. You may not have anything other but that card in the sleeve. So no cheating. Sleeves with mirror-like reflective backgrounds are not allowed. Sleeves with holographic fronts are not allowed. Konami said no to those. Sleeves with designs or artwork on the font that obscure card text or the illustration are not allowed, just like normal. Sleeves with artwork on the backs, provided that all sleeves are identical and / or non-offensive nature, are allowed. The head judge will decide whether or not the artwork on the back of the sleeves is offensive. So pretty much you can't have your dirty sleeves. But you may choose to use a second double sleeving on each of your cards, providing you abide by the following additional rules. So you are allowed to double sleeve now in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is actually really cool because we've never been able to do this. Now, hopefully we get this in Europe, because I would like to use like double sleeves on my extra deck like these, because these are actually really nice sleeves, and it would be nice to be able to do that to keep my cards a little more protected as well. So the rules are as follows. One of your additional sleeves must be clear. The clear sleeve may not have a brand, watermark, or artwork, so long as it does not interfere with the readability of the card. So pretty much something like this that has the border won't deal with basically the backlash from that, because it doesn't obscure the card in any way. The additional clear sleeve may not have a holographic pattern on the front of the sleeve. So just basically like up here, where you're not allowed holographic sleeves, it may not have that either. The additional clear sleeve may be placed on top of the card opposite to the regular sleeve, so the card is sealed as inside the two sleeves. So this basically stops stacking as well, so you're not flicking through your sleeves. You may only have one card in each pair of sleeves. So pretty much, just like before, you can only have one card in each sleeve. You're not allowed anything else in the sleeve. So it's just basically following those rules. Now, this is obviously a good thing for Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it makes sure that nothing is changed. It makes sure nothing that is different. It makes sure nothing is offensive. And it also makes sure that your cards can be slightly more protected, which is really good because we've always wanted this in the TCG to have this double sleeving, which is really, really nice for us. Now, let's go on to the last policy change that I actually wanted to talk about, which is note-taking. Konami have actually changed the way note-taking works. So, note-taking is not allowed in sanctioned or official TCG tournaments with the following exceptions. You must keep a written record of both duelist life points for each duel. Normal. Tracking a mandatory effect reminders, tracking turns and counters, tracking of effects or actions necessary to maintain a legal game state. Written records are the only acceptable form of note-taking. You may not use dice or other counters as forms of note-taking. Notes must be taken quickly so as not to disrupt the flow of the duel. Slow play or other penalties may apply if note-taking slows down the duel. Notes are considered public knowledge and must be provided to the opponent or tournament official upon request. The notes function of Neuron may not be used during a match. So, what this basically says is, and the change here that you may have noticed is, you are allowed to now write down notes for mandatory effects. So if you have activated a mandatory effect that needs to be activated at a different point in the duel, you are allowed to take a note of it on your pad so that your opponent knows that this is going on. This is so you both know this will happen. So for things like such as Metal Foe's Bismugear, if you activate that effect during the main phase and it searches during the end phase, you're allowed to take a note of that so you don't forget the search to keep the game legality in check. You are also not allowed to activate effects still like Scam though, because those will activate during the end phase and you're not allowed to take a note of that. So pretty much this is actually a really good update, because it means for those players who will forget that they have an effect during the end phase because they've done something else in the chain or they've done a ton of other things during their turn, this will now allow players to have a way to write down that mandatory effect so they will be able to get it during the end phase and trigger it during a different phase, such as if you need to pay 1,000 life points during a specific phase, or during the end phase, you need to pay half your life points for something like Power Bond. This now allows you to keep those effects in check, and now you are allowed to write down a note of it. Now, just be careful though, because you do need to be quite quick when writing this note, just because you can get a penalty for this as such as slow playing. Just make sure though you're not doing anything wrong with these rules, and also just make sure that you need to use all forms. So you may not use dice or others counters as forms of tracking, of note taking. So you're pretty much now you're not allowed to use like Final Destiny where you have it in the middle, put a dice on it, and now after 20 turns, whoever wins, you now need to write down that note as well. So you're not allowed to use dice as a way of note taking as well, which is also a new thing, I believe, too. But guys, those are the policy document changes that I wanted to talk about. These are really good for the game, in my opinion, because it means that Konami are actually changing policies. They're making policies better, and they're actually trying to make the game a better place for a lot of players. Hopefully you did enjoy this video, guys, and enjoyed this kind of video, because I do like to make videos like this because it allows me to talk about the game, it allows me to talk about the policies, and it allows me to inform all of you lot as a judge about what's going on in the game. So guys, those are the most important policy changes to note-taking, loops in YuGiOh, YuGiOh Neuron being able to be used as a smartphone app, even though we've never been allowed to use a smartphone on the table before, and also double sleeving in the game can now be legal. Only in the US though, I will make this clear, when we have this in the TCG, this will be really good for the TCG lot, sorry, not the TCG, the European lot. But until then, it is only for the US, not the UK or Europe in general. But guys, thank you so much for watching. Tell me what you thought on this video in the comments section below. Would you like me to do more videos talking about stuff like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on that. And that's it, guys. Robot1 signing out. Later all. Policy changes are always good. Hopefully we get these in Europe soon so I can double sleeve with these. Later all.